So the sun has set and the air quality is improving a little bit here in the Sierra Nevada foothills in eastern California, northeastern California, and I've opened the window for the first time today. And all the wildfires here that luckily are not as close as they were a couple weeks ago, but still raging throughout the state. I think they've got most of them under control, but the fire season will continue, and this is just the new normal here, and it's really got me feeling viscerally the atmospheric nature of our existence. Like Peter Sloterdijk writes about this, if you're familiar with him, and it's a sort of sense of the way that the environment, we're actually enfolded in the environment, right? That the environment's not just like out there, because when the atmosphere itself is full of this particulate matter and the smoke, you feel it inside, and that boundary that we like to think exists between ourselves and the rest of the world becomes more permeable, and we become aware of the ways in which it is permeable. I think an even more intense version of this atmospheric nature of existence, this way that we are encompassed by these layers of sheltering and protection, and that those layers of sheltering and protection constitute and provide for the space in which our life takes root and grows. A more extreme example than just wildfire, and smoke in the air would be like an asteroid or a meteorite impacting the Earth. Just flying in from deep space, and if it's big enough, like totally throwing the Earth system and the biosphere into a new regime of order after a period of chaos, right? I mean, the Earth has been through many periods of chaos and reorganization, and that has been caused by meteorite impacts in the past several times. We've had 5 mass extinctions before. Most scientists now seem pretty sure that we are living through the 6th great mass extinction event. This one isn't caused by an asteroid impact, it's caused by a particular mode of production, industrial capitalism, and the sort of mercantile colonialism out of which it emerged. That mode of production has shifted the entire planet, the biosphere, the atmosphere, the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, into a new regime of order, or really we're shifting it into a period of chaos, because we're not quite sure. We have models, but we're not quite sure what's going to happen next. This much carbon has not been released as quickly in recorded Earth history, right? To go from 220 to 420 parts per million, or roughly, of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in a couple of centuries is a dramatic change. And we understand the greenhouse effect. It's one factor here, but there are non-linear there are non-linear effects of these changes, right? An increase in CO2 could initially produce a greenhouse effect, which indeed global temperatures are rising. We measure that. We see that happening. But that trend might reverse, and we might then rush into an ice age, because the system has been disturbed and a non-linear reaction has been catalyzed. So we don't know what's going to happen. Our climate change models are only as accurate as the free parameters that we adjust and include in the model, and we're trying to make ever more accurate measurements of all the various variables that are at play in the Earth's climate system, but we're always finding new variables and figuring out how to measure them accurately and adding that to the model. And I don't think that process of finding variables and adding them to the model is really going to end. Nature is not a simple system. It's not a system that's just made out of a couple of parts. It's a complex system, meaning that there are always new wholes emerging, and when those new wholes emerge, they change the nature of the parts from which they emerged. And so, yeah, we have a record of the past, but these phases of evolutionary history have been dramatic in the sense that it's not just, maybe biologically we can tell a story of speciation through different phyla, animals and plants and protists and bacteria. We can tell a story about a gradual process, but there are divides and breaks and gaps littered throughout that evolutionary story. So there's a need for a sense of punctuated equilibrium, as Stephen Jay Gould would put it, a sense that, evolution occurs, and many times speciation occurs as a result of cataclysm, catastrophic change that shifts life into a totally new environment and situation, and there's a need to adapt. And yes, there's a Darwinian mechanism of natural selection, but there are other factors in evolution. And so, just because we reject young Earth creationism and accept the evolutionary story, the Darwinian story, doesn't mean that there aren't other evolutionary processes aside from just random mutation and natural selection by a fixed environment. Because, there are those who would call for a sort of not just a neo-Darwinism, but a new evolutionary synthesis of a variety of different perspectives, scientific perspectives, like evolutionary developmental biology, taking the ontogeny and the development of individual organisms seriously as the source of mutations that lead to new species. And taking lateral gene transfer seriously. Epigenetics also needs to be taken seriously. And ways in which what we think of as like consciousness and will and intelligence, that we can't think of these in a Cartesian way as somehow separate from our genes, right? It turns out that our attitudes have physiological effects, and that these physiological effects are at least cueing certain genes, regulating genes to turn them on and turn them off. And so that what we used to think of in the Darwinian story as just random mutation seems to be maybe a little bit more intelligent than Darwin or Dawkins or biologists in that vein would admit. And I think Darwin actually is a figure who's more romantic than contemporary neo-Darwinists often let on. It should be no surprise that the romantic philosopher of nature and scientist and cosmologist Alexander von Humboldt, Darwin considered Alexander von Humboldt to be his main teacher. And he was inspired by Humboldt's vision of the cosmos, and Humboldt was inspired by Schelling's vision of the cosmos. And so this is it's a panpsychist vision. And the problem with Darwin is he wasn't willing to take evolution seriously enough to push it all the way down into the physical world, all the way to the cosmological scale, so that we recognize these various layers of evolution. And one of the crazy things about a radically evolutionary understanding of the universe is that it's not just biological species that evolve. It's not just physical entities like atoms and stars and galaxies and planets that evolve. space-time itself is caught up in the evolutionary process. And so when we try to look at the record, modern day astronomy observes the sky, and modern day particle physics observes in these particle colliders the most minute dimension that we can grasp. And so we're peering into both directions with ever more refined instruments, and what we're seeing there is an echo. What we're seeing is a light pattern that the astronomers will call it the background radiation, the cosmic microwave background radiation. And particle physicists will refer to things like the Higgs field that gives mass to other particles. And there are more advances being made every day. A few days ago, a gravity wave, which is a theoretical construct based on Einstein's relativity, general theory of relativity. This blip was detected in a couple of laser interferometers around the planet, and it seems to be the sort of this gravity wave is an artifact of the merger of two black holes in distant space. I think it was like 8 billion light years away, so it occurred 8 billion years ago. A gravity wave. So there's a medium through which gravity is traveling. That's interesting. What is that medium? It was space-time in the Einsteinian theory, right? But what's that? In an evolutionary context, if space-time itself is caught up in the process of becoming, then we cannot artificially separate mass and energy and light from space-time. And Einstein was trying to find a way to unify these, and then quantum theory emerged and was doing its own thing, describing a discontinuous but non-locally entangled universe, while Einstein was sitting there working away at this theory that described a continuous universe where local causality was still operative. So like the two most successful theories in physics in the 20th century totally destroyed the Newtonian paradigm, and yet they're not compatible with one another. They are fundamentally at odds. And, of course, plenty of physicists and mathematicians are working hard right at the edge of our understanding to develop theories of quantum gravity, to make these two theories, relativity and quantum theory, cohere so as to describe one universe, right? So it's possible that grand unifying theory will be achieved, but then what is a quantum of energy? And our answer to that question, it has to be able to also explain how quanta of energy can become Shakespearean sonnets. And the explanation here would need to be, there are criteria, right? We want it to be rational, and we want it to be empirical. And by these words, rational, empirical, I think we mean we want it to be rational in the sense of logically coherent and consistent. We don't want to contradict ourselves. And we want it to be empirically adequate and applicable. So, these are the criteria by which we judge our knowledge of this evolving reality, right? We can only speculate about its nature, and evolution and the sort of atmospheric nature of our existence is an important clue that I think we need to really pay attention to and elaborate upon in order to understand the deeper intentions of this energy event that we are an expression of. We're trying to understand not just a machine or a collection of objects, that we are like outside of and above, and that we can just tinker with and explain. We're not outside of it. It's in us. We're in it. And that Mario topological relationship confounds any simple bifurcation between, well, the favorite modern categories like mind and nature, or subject and object, quantity and quality. Nature doesn't come divided up into these human categories, right? Nature is whole. We are nature. And so whatever our consciousness is, my wager as a inheritor of the Schellengian tradition of natural philosophy and of the Whiteheadian tradition of natural philosophy and cosmology, I would want to say that the consciousness that we experience here and now as human beings is a natural, emergent phenomenon in the context of the evolution of this universe. And so in order to understand how we could be here to talk about nature, I think nature needs to be imagined in, a more ensouled way than moderns have yet been able to admit. So this is all sort of preamble or preface to a more detailed conversation that I'll post in a separate video about the whole, panpsychism and emergentism debate that I've been having the last several weeks. So that'll be another video